This is the Ricoh GR2, and you are not. Okay, I found it. That was funny before, right? When I was pretending that that was funny. Anyway, it's a very popular camera for good reason, and there are dozens, if not hundreds, of videos about it on YouTube. I'm just going to make the video that I wish I could have seen on the first day or during the first week when I had it, because there are a few things that took a long time for me to figure out that drove me nuts. At first. The first thing I want to talk about is dust. This camera is based on an older electronic version, the GR1, and that one is based on a film camera called the GR-1. And I think they all had this retractable lens hood. So when you power the camera on, it opens up. When you power the camera off, it closes down, and when that happens, apparently this camera has a tendency to suck dust into this lens cavity. So one of the very first accessories you want to get would be one of those blowy, rubbery, bally thingies, and use it as often as you can. But an even more important tip, in my opinion, is something that'll help you do this as little as possible. Whenever you just want to look at your pictures instead of taking new ones, or you want to get access to your menus to change your settings, you can push and hold down the playback button, the button that you would use to look at your images, and that powers the camera on as well, but without opening the lens. So then you can do whatever you want here on the little back screen in terms of settings, or looking at or even editing your images without opening this dust trap. One of the greatest features of the Ricoh GR2 is a thing called snap focus. I don't know if it's technically difficult to engineer, or if it's somehow protected by copyright, or whatever the reason is that you don't find this on every single camera. But this is one of the unique features of this camera. It basically means that you can preset a focus distance at which this camera just locks in the focus. There's not going to be any hunting, there's not going to be any manual or autofocus. It just gets whatever is at that distance sharp. You achieve that by just pushing the exposure button all the way down, not do that half touchy thing that you usually do to trigger autofocus. Now the great thing is you have access to snap focus even if a different focus mode such as autofocus is set as your default. So let's say, for instance, you've set your focus mode to multi-AF, which is the autofocus mode in which the camera uses several different focus points. But you want to use spot autofocus. If spot autofocus is turned on, then you can just achieve that by pushing the exposure button all the way down. The one thing about spot autofocus that's a little tricky is that when you're walking in the street, you don't always want it necessarily at the same distance. I mean, let's say somebody's coming towards you, your snap focus is set to 5 meters, but you want to give it a shot, when they're a little closer than that, when they're at like 2.5 meters or whatever. If you go through the menu and look at spot autofocus, you will see that there are different distances available. The problem is going in the menu is always a time-consuming thing, and in street photography, speed is everything. So there's a very handy shortcut that doesn't work in all of the modes here. It works in, I think it works in program mode. Let me just make sure. Yes, it does. Or in aperture priority. It doesn't work in that super automatic mode that's symbolized by the little green camera icon. But what it is you push down the little flower symbol on that D-pad and hold it. And then you will see in the top right corner of your screen, next to that meter distance number that's displayed there, there is going to be a little triangle. And that means that now if you turn the front wheel, you can change your snap focus distance in increments from 1 meter, 1.5 meters, 2 meters, 2.5 meters, 5 meters, and infinity. So that's a very quick and handy way to adjust the snap focus. That makes it an even more versatile thing to use on the go. The very first accessory I bought for my GR2 is this pretty little leather case. I don't think it's made by Ricoh, but it's very nice. And the camera fits in it well. The second thing I bought was something that made it impossible to use this, which is typical me. And what that is, however, is such a great thing that I'm happy about not using this anymore. And that is this guy. That drives me 1000% absolutely insane in YouTube videos or other presentations, or when salespeople do it. I walk out of the store, somebody refers to any kind of inanimate object, like a lens or a camera or an electronic device, as this guy, I go away.
So let's cut this guy open.
I picked this guy up right here. It has a 2.8 lens and it's a crop sensor camera. I got the sh.t, this guy.
I thought that I would do a little bit of an update on this guy here.
This is the Voigtlander 28mm optical viewfinder. I think it's called Brightline, something like that. I was going to say clear view, but it's called Brightline. It has bright lines. That would explain that. And it fits on the hot shoe of the GR2. Now, why 28mm, you ask? The GR2 has a APSC crop sensor. An APS-C sensor, it's a crop sensor camera.
I picked this guy up right here. It has a 2.8 lens and it's a crop sensor camera.
So that means that you have to multiply the focus length of the lens, which is noted here on the front as 18.3, by a factor of 1.5. So that gives you roughly 28mm equivalent in film camera terms. So this is the perfect field of view. Of course, it extends above the actual case of the camera, makes it a little bulkier, also makes it look really cute. I think it looks really cool that way. Of course, it voids, the pocketability, if that's a word. But it's great, especially in bright sunlight. The screen on the back of the camera is pretty good, but when there's really bright sunlight, you won't see a thing. So this viewfinder will help you then. And of course, when it's dark, also, like in night photography, it's really helpful to have this little thing. Many people like the GR2 because you can shoot from the hip, and I do that actually a lot because I tend to be, shy and when it comes to shooting strangers. But you shouldn't shoot anybody. But if you want to go to the really classic, lift the camera to your eye and compose your image that way, if you have time for that, or if that's just more your style, then a viewfinder is great. I think Ricoh makes their own, but I love this Voigtlander one because I love Voigtlander anyway. I love their lenses, and I just love the way that it's round. The Ricoh one is kind of square-shaped with rounded edges. It looks like a 1960s TV set a little bit. I think this one is much cooler looking. One thing that drove me insane for days when I tried to figure it out were the settings of the flash. They're a little erratic, and you don't get a detailed error message on your menu when something isn't working or why it's not working. So that's the kind of thing where people who bought a new camera frequently think there's something wrong with theirs because something doesn't work the way they expect it to, and there doesn't seem to be a logical explanation. So I'm just going to tell you this because it took me a lot of time, and probably most people don't have this problem, but I had it for a while, and I was trying to figure out how to use the flash. And normally when you hit the flash symbol on the right of the D-pad, the settings come right up and you can scroll through the various flash settings. And it just wasn't happening for me. And then, I looked online, and in all these forums, people just say, well, you have to make sure that the flash is open, that it's popped up. That's true. But another thing that you can't have is your camera can't be set to continuous shooting. Not continuous autofocus, but continuous, like, I don't know what it's called exactly in the menu. Continuous mode. Continuous mode has to be off. I'm assuming there's not enough power to enable the flash to fire several times in a row. But that was just something that I had said very early on and forgot about it, actually. And then I came very close to thinking that I had bought a lemon. But that's the explanation why that didn't work. So just thought I'd mention it. And one last thing that I'd like to say that is not necessarily specific to the GR2 is about image format. You probably know this, but if you set your image format to JPEG, all of your settings, including what on the GR2 is called effects, for instance, black and white is called an effect, which you can debate that. I wouldn't call that an effect, but all those cross-process, positive film, all these settings are baked into the JPEG and can't be removed or changed after the fact. In most cases, in some cases with a lot of work in Photoshop, you might be able to. But the only way to get an image that retains a maximum of possibilities in terms of manipulating is to shoot RAW. And there is less and less of an excuse, to not do that. I mean, nowadays SD cards are affordable. Even the big ones are getting more affordable. And so you should set your GR2 to the mode where it shoots RAW plus JPEG. Basically, each camera that offers that option creates a JPEG from the RAW with an engine that's built into the camera. So every camera manufacturer has their own specific JPEG look that's kind of designed by the engineers of the camera company. But if you have both, then you're going to have two files, a big RAW file and a smaller JPEG file on your chip. And you can go into that RAW file and bring a black and white photo back to color, change exposure, all those good things that you can do in a sophisticated RAW converter such as Lightroom or Iridium Developer or Photoshop itself. Yeah, that's about it. You can change the white balance in a RAW file, which can not only be a way to fix weird lighting, like if an image looks yellowish, but it can be a creative tool. I think white balance is an underappreciated way of designing the look of your photos. Why does this say retro? Oh, I set this effect thing to retro. There's a button on the left called effect that calls up that menu with which you can choose all these effects, but like the function 1 button, which is the left side of the D-pad, and the function 2 button here on the bottom, these are, you can configure these to whatever you want. You can use them to whatever is most important to you. One more thing, when you look at your photos, the way I like to do it, there's a little animation that's like a sideways motion, which I like. It's like leafing through a book. With this adjust this ISO adjust button on top. You can actually go back and forth that way. And if you hit the button, it automatically jumps to the biggest resolution. It jumps really close to, so you can check real quickly how in focus your image is. And then with the D-pad, you can scroll around in it to find the part of the image that you really need to be in focus. And if it's not, you can throw it away right away. So this is a fast way of looking at your images. Just scroll through them with this adjust lever there on top. Oh, and one last thing, one last thing. A lot of people don't know where the exposure compensation is. Well, it's here. It's at this plus minus button. In most cases. I think there are probably some settings where that's not the case. But in most cases, that's where it is. Okay. Thank you. Enjoy.